in the room, it shouldn't be like that. It will be like that. And there we are. So greetings to all. We can now formally start. Excellencies, dear delegates, dear colleagues, on behalf of the co-organizers, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome you and thank you for having also for standing up and for having joined us here at the Palais des Nations and online for a special event that is joining two series of events, dialogues and talks, the Geneva Rights and Environmental Talks, organized in the margins of the Human Rights Council, reflecting on the work of the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to a healthy environment, who is here with us, and the Geneva Dialogues on Minerals and Metals, a series of events to explore interlinkages between the various multilateral debates and negotiations addressing sustainable mineral and metal resources governance in Geneva and beyond that we have launched last month. These two series are co-convened by the Geneva Environment Network with a series of organizers and member states, which logo you can see on the slide. The second, this is also the second of the 6 talks to unpack and reflect on some of the key messages of the Special Rapporteur latest report on ocean and human rights. And we will be discussing in this talk deep sea mining. As we are about to start, I just wanted to mention that the United Nations Environment Programme has issued a note last year stressing that the environmental implications of deep sea mining need to be comprehensively assessed. And for this session, we are joined by policy, science, and campaigner experts who have been looking into deep sea mining. We don't have a representative from a private sector as the time was not convenient for them. However, we had some interesting discussions in preparation of this session, notably with Swiss Re, that was the first insurer to exclude deep sea mining. They have prepared an emerging risk report on this issue that we will also be sharing in our resources. Before you are formally welcomed by the UN Special Rapporteur, Astrid Puentes, who will open the event and set the scene for the discussion. A few housekeeping rules, and sorry for those who were already here in the session before. The documents presented, the summary as well as the video will be available as usual on the webpage of this event. And for who is online, you have the transcript available in over 100 languages, and there is a slide now on the screen explaining you how you can access this. So now I'm turning to the UN Special Rapporteur to formally open this event. Ms. Puentes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Diana. I will be very brief because it's the report, and I really look forward to hear it from you and your presentations. I just want to very briefly address a couple of things. And as I said before, one of the key reasons why I decided to write the report on the ocean and human rights is because we need to have a comprehensive and holistic perspective of the ocean, not only natural resources independently or areas independently. And also, one of the key things that I learned doing the report is that we also have to talk about the ocean as one single biome that is connected and not separate oceans. And that seemed to be a small grammatical thing, which is not, of course. And so the main message and work that I would like to, or contribution with the report, is that message that we're not talking about natural resources, we're talking about biome, and of course, where life started in the planet. And while thinking about the deep sea mining, and you mentioned, Diana, and the people from the private sector, but I also wanted to highlight some things that sometimes we forget, but I think it's key. The biggest companies in the world that are producing, for example, electric cars, have said that we do not need deep sea mining. And so that is something that is very important, and I also highlight because it's not only about protecting whales or penguins or the ocean, it's actually that most of the sector agree that there's a lot of critical minerals that are not needed. And so one of the key things that I also, and we even released a statement with Elisa Morgera, the Special Rapporteur on Climate Change, is that the first most important thing that is needed to do when we talk about deep sea mining and critical minerals is whether the world needs that and for what. and to thinking about the demand of those minerals. Just want to highlight then a couple of things: the importance of having human rights-based approach in general for the ocean, but definitely also for the marine. And one, and you would see, and you saw already maybe in the recommendations, the importance to also have a human rights-based approach included in the ISA, in all institutions that are addressing and analyzing and building the legal frameworks for specific and specialized areas for the ocean, including, of course, deep sea. I just want to also highlight the importance of the leadership for a lot of states that we really hope that they continue increasing. There are today 32 states that we know that have been that have been or are increasingly joining the need to be thinking about it, giving us more time and proposing and implement or supporting the precautionary principle and the use of the precautionary principle. And I want to also finalize with highlighting that there are also different ways in which states are joining. Surprisingly, and I think that it was very positive thing that the Norwegian government in December also announced to stop the licenses for deep sea mining during this year. And I highlighted that in a statement also in January, because sometimes from special rapporteurs, we are putting the fingers on the bad things that the states are doing, but we also have to applaud and to highlight those kind of very good decisions. So I just want to stop here and really thank you for being here, for your patience, and I look forward to the
Thank you very much, Astrid. And I forgot to mention a very important person. He's here on my right, the representative of Earth Justice to UN Geneva, who is indeed the chairing and moderating this session. Yves.
Thank you very much, Diana. And well, we've just seen how challenging it can be to try to navigate in the abysses of the internet. But it's, and thanks a lot to the GEN team who have made it possible to have this discussion and to have everybody online. It was challenging, and we're very happy to be able to have then now this discussion. Mrs. Special Rapporteur, as you said, as you just said, it is the very first time that the Human Rights Council is working on a human rights-based approach to a specific biome. Even the word biome still probably needs to be better explained within the within the council itself. I've experienced people are sometimes wondering what we're talking about. So definitely there is here a need to go forward with that. And indeed, this question of the abyss and how important it is, because it's a very important part of the planetary ecosystem for all what it provides, but it's not well known, and the fact that we don't know much about it does not allow that it could be exploited just because precisely we can use ignorance. And that's a very, very big challenge. And as you just said, a number of countries have been looking at this very, very seriously. And so I'm very happy to give the floor as the first speaker for our discussion to Mr. Régis Farret, who is the environmental counselor, also working on sustainable development at the permanent mission of France to the United Nations office here in Geneva. So Régis, France has been engaged very much in this discussion, to the point also that now you are co-chairing with Costa Rica the coming third United Nations Conference on Ocean in Nice in June. So the role of France in this discussion is particularly important. So we're very happy to have you with us and to listen to what you will have to say for your country.
Well, thank you very much for this nice introduction, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to express my views or the views of France. I'm very honored to be with you and with Astrid on this part. So yes, we have concerning deep sea mining, France has a very ambitious view on this deep issue. And we know that there are currently important discussions taking place at the ISA, the International Seabed Authority, in order to write or draft a mining code regarding this future exploitation of the deep sea bed. France has an ambitious position concerning marine environment. We believe that our scientific knowledge of the deep seabed is still incomplete, especially concerning the risks of irreversible consequences that could be generated by mining operations. It can be on ocean pollution, on the biodiversity, or even on climate change. Therefore, we wish to take the necessary time to discuss and negotiate a mining code, or future mining code, in order to elaborate a robust legal framework that respects the environment, that is transparent, and that also takes into account the interests of indigenous peoples and local communities, which is one of the main issues, of course. So we will work towards this end during the next council's meeting, which begins next week. Even more than that, following the precautionary principle, our position is that the adoption of that we should adopt a pause or a moratorium on exploitation at the very least, and that this is urgent and mandatory. As of today, 32 countries have expressed their views and in line with this conclusion, most of them joining a coalition named Friends of the Deep. It's an important result. However, we all know that there are powerful actors that are ready to start the exploitation of the seabed. Therefore, we need to have your support and to have other states joining us in a stronger position at the ISA. Once again, the objective is to have at least a precautionary pause or a moratorium. This now leads me naturally to the UNOC conference, the third United Nations Ocean Conference, as you mentioned, that we will host in Nice, because this issue of this deep sea mining will be specifically addressed during the first panel of this conference. So UNOC 3 is co-organized by France and Costa Rica. It has strong ambitions in terms of high-level political mobilization and concrete results. Several events will take place ahead of the conference, June 4 to 8, sorry. The Science Congress and also the Blue Economy and Finance Forum. That will bring together players from the maritime sector, blue economy and finance, and result in announcement of financial commitments. From June 9 to 13, then the UNOC conference itself will take place, opened by the UN Secretary General. It will feature 10 ocean action panels chaired by a tandem of North-South countries at head of state level. Voluntary commitments will also be announced during the conference by states. Once again, concrete outputs are our priority. Another important point, especially from a Geneva perspective, I think, is the link with existing multilateral processes. We are doing our utmost to ensure that the momentum surrounding UNOC 3 will allow for the entry into force of the Agreement of Biodiversity in the High Seas, known as BBNJ, and the Agreement on Harmful Subsidies, known as Fish 1, managed by WTO, and many other processes. There will be also a number of scientific events and outputs, which I cannot describe here. But please believe that the extreme mobilization of our teams and all our partners is meant to be up to the political, financial, and scientific challenges that the ocean is facing. Concrete examples are the concrete need for knowledge and the moratorium on deep sea mining. Your presence here is also a sign that you are part of this mobilization. Thank you for this, and I invite you to join us in June.
Thank you very much, Régis, and let me use this opportunity to remind everybody that we will have a specific discussion at a side event at the Human Rights Council tomorrow at 1, precisely on what is the contribution that the human rights bodies should be bringing to UNOC 3, and we'll probably come back on this a bit later in our discussion. But as you said, Régis, this is working in the deep is quite an issue, and you mentioned very well the challenges that we have in terms of exploiting this area. But precisely, what is at stake? What is exactly the challenge? What do we know about the ecosystems? You've mentioned the risks, Régis. Well, precisely, what are the risks? And I'm very happy now to turn to Clément Chazot, who is the Marine Program Officer from the Ocean Team at IUCN, the International Union on the Conservation of Nature, a very, very important network of scientists and states and NGOs who precisely have the expertise on these biodiversity and natural questions. So Clément, can you just tell us more about this deep sea ocean ecosystem?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank all the organizers for inviting IUCN to take part in this important panel. And today I'll focus, as you mentioned, on the protection of biodiversity and deep sea ecosystem. So first of all, a bit of context. I think we all know how important the ocean is for many things. It plays a crucial role in addressing the triple planetary crisis, but it also provides invaluable ecosystem services such as climate regulations, food security for billions, and also support human health, cultural values, and well-being. So deep sea ecosystem is a key component to the global ocean, as mentioned you, Special Rapporteur Astrid, in the opening. Thank you very much. And these deep sea ecosystems have unique features. They are vast, pristine, and largely unexplored. They host incredible biodiversity, despite some statements that we can hear. And they also present biophysical features that support key processes for planetary stability. So they are remarkably complex, and any changes in ocean systems can lead to global repercussions. And we know that the ocean is already facing many existing threats. We know ocean warming, ocean acidifications, and now we are potentially seeing a new threat being added to this, deep seabed mining. Some actors are indeed pushing for this industry to commence very soon, yet in the likely absence of regulations that are agreed by everybody, scientific evidence, and also social acceptance. So these slides try and picture and capture some of the potential risk, as mentioned. Some are known, some are yet to be discovered, but to go through a few of them, potentially deep seabed mining would lead to habitat loss, fragmentation, or modification of the environment. You could upset the microbial equilibriums that you find in a deep sea ecosystem. Also very important, you could disrupt some of the ecological functions of the ocean and potentially impact some of the ecosystem services. And one that we can mention is potentially impacting fisheries and also the disruptions of marine food web that are key for society around the world. There could be some direct smothering or also some pollution through light, noise, and vibration that is inserted into the environment. On top of that, and not represented, you also have to wonder how those impacts would be cumulative with one another. So these are some of the unknowns that we cannot predict today. So we always hear that we don't know enough about the deep sea environment, and this is the most recent comprehensive study that looks to the scientific knowledge that we have to inform environmental management around the world. So this is quite a complex table, but basically looking at habitats that will be targeted by deep sea mining activities. You can see the table with boxes that go from white to dark blue. And it's mostly dominated by white and light blue boxes. And this means or translates into categories where we don't have data or we have major gaps to be able to environmentally manage deep seabed mining activities. So whilst we are increasing the knowledge in deep seabed area, it is clear that the gap still clearly dominates today. And so with this in mind, IUCN sees that rather than rushing towards exploitation, we should collaboratively work together to leverage funding, but also support independent scientific research to better understand this environment and also the water column above it, to inform at a later stage the mineral management and not the other way around. So this led to a statement signed by over 900 marine scientists and policy experts to warn on the possible consequences of deep seabed mining. I wanted to illustrate with a very concrete example. So please meet the scaly foot snail. This is a species that was listed as endangered in 2019 by the IUCN through its IUCN Red List of Threatened Species tool. And it was the first species to be listed as endangered due to the potential seabed mining activity commencing. And you can wonder why this is important, where deep seabed mining could jeopardize the very survival of this species that is only found in 3 ecosystems in the Indian Ocean. And yet we could discover a lot from this species. For instance, it has incredible heat-resisting properties that we could benefit from. And we know that the deep sea and the ocean at large holds a lot of values and marine genetic resources that could be used. And one other example that we can mention is everybody remembers those COVID-19 rapid tests. well, they actually use deep sea bacteria material. And so this is yet another example where we could learn a lot from deep sea environment rather than exploiting it and risking its stability. So yes, whilst we have a lot to learn from it, we know already that the potential to discover and learn from it is great. Briefly focusing on deep sea mining and human rights, I just wanted to highlight an initial reflection piece that we put together with a list of authors, which I wish to acknowledge. But basically, one of the key messages was that deep seabed mining will not only impact biodiversity, it would also affect human rights from the degradation of its environmental ecosystem services it provides. And there's 4 themes that I already mentioned, and there's more captured in this concept. So I invite you to really go and look into it. One thing to note is that the ISA right now is overlooking those aspects, and they should be better taken into consideration as they are developing the regulatory aspects of deep sea activities. And this is also especially true as the overarching conventions, UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, designates the seabed and its mineral resources as common heritage of humankind. This means that they should really be managed for the benefit of us all. And today, we feel this is not the case. So ISA must align with this principle and also recognizing recent developments, as mentioned by Régis in its opening, with the recent adoption of BBNJ agreements. This is also an aspect that ISA has to align with. So in concluding, just wanted to say that a clean, healthy, and sustainable deep ocean is not only an environmental issue, it is clearly a fundamental human right that must be defended for the benefits of current and future generations. And whilst the necessary safeguards to protect deep sea ecosystems are not in place, deep sea mining should not be allowed to commence. And until then, IUCN continues to uphold its position of a moratorium as reflected in Resolution 122. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Clément. This was really a clear presentation of some of the basic elements we have to keep in mind when we think about this issue of deep sea mining. And actually, it resonates very well with the report of the special rapporteur that will be presented tomorrow at the Human Rights Council. One of the reasons why we have this call for exploiting the nodules in the abyss is that we need more material and critical material for the green transition. Let's raise this question: how true is this? So I'm very happy now to turn to Martin Webeler, who is the Deep Sea Mining Campaign Lead at the Environmental Justice Foundation. He's joining us online. Thank you very much for being with us, Martin, and apologies for the technicalities we ran through at the very beginning. Thank you for staying with us. And so the floor is yours. You have quite an experience and quite a number of elements to share with us precisely on how much do we really need the material which is so deep into the seas.
Yes, thank you so much. I just would start the presentation and would, if you can just share with me whether you can see it on the screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to this very important panel and to discuss also a very urgent matter, which is deep sea mining. I would just dive straight into it because I only have 5 minutes and a lot to share, but happy to connect after the presentation with all of you who have questions regarding the input. So as was just introduced, I'm talking about the topic, do we need the minerals for the green transition? Because we see that this is a narrative that is put out there by proponents of deep sea mining, especially deep sea mining companies. And we published a report in 2024 addressing this question directly, and we come to the conclusion that the expansion of mining activities into deep sea areas is a false solution. And with that, we are not alone. Leading scientists, including the European Academy Science Advisory Council, are coming to the same conclusion. In this report, we address different dimensions: the future demand for critical minerals, the handling of resources currently, and the impact that circular economy strategies can have on supply and demand. And Before continuing, I just want to highlight really one important issue, and that is when we talk about polymetallic nodules, which are the minerals that are the most sought after and the first one to exploit, we are talking exactly about 4 minerals that are contained in these polymetallic nodules, and that is nickel, manganese, cobalt, and copper. Only 4 of them, because like we see that deep sea mining proponents say that we find all the minerals that we need for the green transition in the deep sea, while in the polymetallic nodules, at least it's only 4 economically viable. So when we talk about future demand of minerals, I'm sure like if I would pose this question in this audience here, we would get very different answers. And this is also because we see that estimates have the same issue. You know, we see a broad range of demand that we have. When we just take nickel, for instance, we see that estimates range from 24 to 100 million tons of nickel that we need. And there's a good reason for that, because it is very hard to predict future demand, because the assumptions that are underlining these estimates are very different. So when we talk, for instance, about battery technologies that are currently developed and future technologies that will impact that demand, that is very hard to predict. Another factor are assumed recycling capabilities or the overall size of EV fleet, or also very important are implications of policy shifts that can significantly impact how many resources we need. What is also very important to highlight is that many of these estimates are based on a linear economy or a business as usual model, or as you can also describe it, a take, make, waste economic model. And that is a very, very crucial factor in all of this, because currently we are producing 65 million tons of e-waste per year. And the United Nations estimates that by 2030, we produce 75 million tons of e-waste per year. And only a fraction of that is recycled. And just to put that into perspective, when we take 65 million tons of e-waste and put that into garbage trucks, we can form a line that that goes across the entire equator of our planet. That is currently what we produce each and every year on e-waste. Now, we are handling our resources in a very unsustainable way, not only minerals, but like in general, but minerals included. So currently we are using the resources of 1.7 Earths. And by we, I'm primarily referring to Western societies. And in this, as I think we all know in this audience here, is a very injustice already underlined. And we see currently that deep sea mining companies primarily are pushing to do deep sea mining, and they are primarily coming from Western societies again. And this is also why the UN Special Rapporteur Puentes is also in parts referring to that, perpetuating systematic inequalities. And we talk also to local communities in the Pacific, and I highly recommend to go online and share and take a look at our videos where they share their views. But just to outline that, it poses a significant threat to food security and also disregards cultural and spiritual values of local communities. Now, there is an alternative to that, and the alternative is a circular economy and what comes with it. And what comes with it is also the reduction in mineral demand. And there's, for instance, a SINTEF study out there commissioned by WWF that assesses that we can reduce the mineral demand for the future by 58% if we implement certain measures that drive the circular economy. We can also increase the recovery rates with already existing technologies. We can rework how we use our mobility system. And one very crucial factor is battery technologies. And we can see, and that is outlined here in this circular graphic, that battery technologies that don't need nickel or cobalt or manganese, so 3 of the 4 minerals in the deep sea, are increasingly having increased market share. So here is indicated LFP batteries that don't need these minerals, and the market share in 2021 was 17%, already 1 year later, 31%. And this trend is moving in that direction. So we need less mineral dependent battery technologies, and these battery technologies are developed currently. And as was also outlined by the Special Rapporteur earlier, We are working together also with companies, including BMW, who committed to for a moratorium in deep sea mining because they are not dependent on these minerals. And I just want to share this quote shared with us by BMW and close my presentation with that. And they are saying, "We are committed to not using minerals from the deep sea as a precautionary measure. We have integrated the issue of deep sea mining as a building block in our biodiversity strategy and will not deviate from this commitment. Rather, we aim to utilize the potential of recycling to close material cycles and reduce the need for primary raw materials. We also communicate to our suppliers to exclude raw materials from deep sea for our products." And like I said, there are many, many companies more, including Google, SAP, global brands that committed to a moratorium in deep sea mining. And yeah, with that, I close my very short remarks. And as I said, very happy to connect to talk more about this topic.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was really very, very clear. And also giving quite some hopes that some changes and some transition can really become successful. Now, unfortunately, we don't only have the question of the critical minerals as one of the targets. We also have issues around fossil fuel and other type of exploitation. So I'm very happy now to turn to Bruna Campos, who is the senior campaigner on offshore oil and gas at the Center for International Environmental Law. And so thank you, Bruna, for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I don't have a presentation, I just have a lot of points to be made. Where we're coming from as CIEL, so I work obviously for the Center for International Environmental Law, and our focus has been on halting offshore oil and gas in the oceans. But one of the things that is clear, and this is the link to the deep sea mining conversation, is that extraction of the deep sea is not new. Obviously, the oil and gas industry has for a long time been extracting from the deep sea. And in a sense, we have already quite a lot of scientific research that explains the impact that actually has on the deep sea. So we would like to, in this particular case, actually talk about those impacts in a way to illustrate that the link between sort of extractivism, so extracting any type of mineral resources from the deep sea, and how that actually would impact human rights and the rights of people who are dependent on ocean resources, and the fact that basically even if you're in the deep sea, you still have an impact on coastal communities. So that's in a sense where we're coming from, and I have to say that Astrid's report does actually reflect also oil and gas as an impact to the oceans, and it goes along on sort of on the aspects of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. But we want to also highlight that the impact is beyond that. It also has an impact on biodiversity. And in general, sort of extraction of mineral resources can have, I think Clément has already explained quite a lot of those impacts, but I wanted to sort of tie it down a little bit to sort of how oil and gas has those impacts. So one of the things that, as an example, is like obviously drilling, and I know that for deep sea mining is not just the drilling that's problematic, but in the oil and gas, drilling can actually have released wastewater from offshore oil and gas platforms during production, which causes contamination, and this actually degrades the food web around the platforms and can lead to an ecosystem collapse. I mean, I think Clément has already explained how it works, but that has been documented already quite a lot for offshore oil and gas. So I think it's important to just go and look at already scientific research that has already looked into those types of impacts. The other thing that we wanted to highlight is that the impacts is not just in the deep sea. So in the sense that the cumulative impacts you're going to actually experience, and I know Clément, you explained the sort of light and noise pollution and vibration pollution within the water column, but actually that if you have activities within the oceans that are drilling in deep sea, you would have impacts also above the water column. So for example, for offshore oil and gas, like flaring. Gas flaring is a common practice, which can cause light pollution and disturbs fish, turtles, birds, everything. It's sort of like, it's not just the deep sea that's going to be impacted. So it's sort of like, it's the whole ecosystem that in a sense faces the consequences of an activity that you're considering is just happening in the deep sea, but actually it has an impact everywhere else. So one of the things that obviously we're connecting quite a lot is how that actually impacts us in the end, sort of humans and communities. And obviously, for example, the ecosystem, the food web has been, and has again explained this, but from an oil and gas, there has been a lot of experience of sort of like, I think most people here are aware of sort of, for example, the disastrous, let's say, occurrence of oil and gas in sort of like the Niger Delta. I think that's a really good example of sort of where it can, how communities have highly been affected, and where the fisheries has fishing community has really collapsed, and is still an ongoing problem. And one of the things that also we want to emphasize is that benthic communities have a really hard time to recover. So in a sense, like the destruction you have and how it comes back, it just takes a long time to come back, and sometimes it just doesn't come back. And another example is sort of from an oil and gas example, is the Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. It's today, I mean, it's been 10 years, more than 10 years now, it's 2010. So it's been 14 years, and you still have a high loss of coral branches of the coral reefs. So it's not recovering. So it's just to say that an impact on the benthic community will massively destroy the food web, but also it will take a long time for it to recover. And sort of all the communities are dependent on those coral reefs or on those food webs and those systems to sustain it. It will collapse. It will collapse for everyone. So the way that I saw, sorry, I'm like kind of like don't want to ramble on, and especially because a lot of people have already explained some of these points. But I think one of the things that Astrid does make an important point is that that links to human rights is that the economies that are actually dependent will actually cause a lot of sort of loss, let's say economic loss within those communities. So we are actually very supportive of what you have written, but just want to also highlight that we can actually just learn from other experiences from the oil and gas industry. It's just also to say that, because it has been mentioned, the precautionary principle it's one of the things that was completely ignored, was to take precaution for the impacts. The oil and gas industry has been drilling in the deep sea without any real understanding of what kind of impact it would actually have to the ecosystem. And there's already a lot of examples. I think actually one just really recent one that I just want to emphasize is in 6 days ago or 7 days ago now, there's been a gas leak in the very recent exploration of oil and gas in Senegal. So Senegal is just started becoming an oil and gas producer last year. It was never been, and in this specific place, which is the Mauritania and Senegal, that have a specific BP that has currently drilling there. They have had a gas leak, and it's a deep sea coral reef. It's one of the world's, I think, the world's biggest deep sea coral reefs, which we don't actually know what kind of impact that gas leak can actually have on the coral reefs. So you're just kind of hoping that it won't, but in a sense, and this is the issue with sort of starting extractivism activities in the deep sea, is that you just really don't understand what's going to happen, because we don't have those answers, and I don't know if we'll ever have. So taking the precautionary approach is basically like, as has just been explained, do we actually need this type of minerals? No. So why are we going to try to sort of start mining for something that we don't actually need, that is going to most likely have a tremendous impact on sort of the marine environment in communities that could probably never be able to recover, and have a massive impact on indigenous peoples, and also as well as local communities that are independent of those ecosystems. So that's just what I wanted to say. And if you have more questions on the oil and gas industry, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Bruna. I think it was quite important to remind us that there's unfortunately, in terms of risk, more than just the exploitation of the nodules, because that's usually what is being focused in this discussion. But indeed, the very classical oil industry, what we know about, is also directly involved in this issue. And thank you very much for bringing our attention to this. Also, just to add that when you mentioned the deep sea coral reefs, it's a rather recent discovery that you do have corals also in darker and much colder waters. And indeed, it's a recent discovery. How does it work? What are its resources? How does it relate to the coral reefs? We usually know which are the ones much closer to the surface. This is still a big unknown. We need to know more about it. And indeed, it's what you have just said. The recent incident a few weeks ago is a quite worrying one in this perspective. And now just a technical issue, because as we started late due to the technical difficulties, we still have two more speakers that will probably bring us a bit later than just the planned closing time. I hope everybody will be able to stay with us, so that we can go to we can really fully hear our two last speakers, and perhaps also have a few exchange of questions if times allow. As the special rapporteur said at the very beginning, we don't only have risks, but as we heard also, we have a number of states who are taking this up very seriously and trying to bring protection policies in place. And so we're very happy now to turn to Cecilia Atherton, who is the attaché at the permanent mission of the Republic of Panama here at the UN in Geneva. And so, Cecilia, can you tell us a bit more about Panama's policy precisely in terms of protecting the ocean? We know Panama is quite involved in this issue, so we're very happy to have another state, not only just France, but to have another state with us who can share its policies. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Yves, and thank you, Diana and Dijen, for inviting me to this event to share with you my country's position in this crucial issue. I would like to share with you the monitoring of the deep sea mining and my country's ocean protection policy. In June 2021, the International Seabed Authority, ISA, received a request from one of its members invoking a treaty provision known as the 2-year rule. This provision requires the ISA Council to finalize and adopt the necessary regulations within 2 years if requested by a member state whose national intends to submit a plan for exploitation of these minerals. If the Council fails to complete these regulations within the prescribed period and exploitation is requested if submitted, the Council will still have to consider and provisionally approve the application despite the absence of a mining code. The request before mentions has raised concerns about the potential environmental and social impacts, as there is still no enforceable mining code for deep sea exploitation. This is why in 2022, we joined 30 other countries in the Alliance for a Moratorium on Deep Sea Mining. We cannot endorse the mining of an area rich in biodiversity, home of thousands of yet to be identified species and complex ecological interactions that remain largely unexplored. Panama's position is unequivocal because this deep sea ecosystem takes over millions of years to form and is teeming with life, both in the water column and on the seabed. Extracting them without fully understanding this role of marine biodiversity could have irreversible consequences. I take this opportunity to reaffirm the commitment to the Territorial Alliance, as we were one of the first countries in the Eastern Tropical Pacific to achieve 30% protection of our marine areas through the expansion of the Cordillera de Coiba area in 2022, shortly after neighboring countries followed suit. The Cordillera de Coiba and Balco Volcán, marine protected areas created to safeguard seamounts. While mining companies are currently focused on the deep sea floor, there were still no elevation, these seamounts and hydrothermal vents also contain variable metals, such as copper, lithium, cobalt, and like my other colleague said before. This is precisely why they must be protected. Panama consolidates its position as a world's blue leader, protecting currently 56% of its jurisdictional waters, of which 27 are absolute protection. This enlargement increased by the Banco Volcan Marine Reserve. This year, we will expand marine protected areas, further increasing this percentage in the coming months. We were the first Latin American country to enact a comprehensive law protecting coral reef in 2022. We banned the capture of marine mammals for captivity, and we successfully include over 100 species of sharks and rays in the CITES Annex 1. We have ratified the BBNG agreement, and we are in the process of ratifying the WTO Fisheries Subsidies Agreement, and many others to come. This effort has positioned us as a leader in ocean governance. Our action demonstrates our unwavering commitment to ocean protection and conservation, as well as our contribution to achieve the sustainable development goals. Next week, during the 30th session of the International Seabed Authority, that will take place in Jamaica from the 17th to the 28th of March, the Panamanian delegation will continue advocating for the protection of the nature, especially in the field of the deep sea mining. Thank you for your attention. I can share with you as well the information after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. And it's great to hear this effort. It's great to hear this mobilization of a number of states in this debate. So this is a very worrying issue, but we also have very committed actors. And this is really the challenge. We're very happy to be able to reflect this in this discussion. So our last speaker is quite an important person in this discussion, because Benjamin Schachter, is the leader of the Climate Change and Environment team at the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights. And Ben and his team, or I should say the team under Ben's leadership, has really pushed forward this question of environmental rights and all of the environmental components of human rights in this discussion. And so, Ben, we'd like to hear how do you and your office and your team see this question of what had been mentioned at the very beginning, a human rights-based approach, specifically when we're talking about a biome, as we mentioned at the beginning, and also a very specific issue, which is this deep sea mining. What is your team's take on this?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to all of the previous speakers who have covered a lot of ground and I think articulated very well a human rights-based approach to this question. The office has produced a brief document on key human rights considerations related to deep seabed mining. And that was issued and disseminated a while back in the context of the ongoing ISA discussions related to this issue. And maybe I'll briefly go through that, but I know we are over time already, so I'll try to be very quick. We start out, and I'll just share with an emphasis on the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And in that context, Eve, your question, I mean, all biomes are interconnected and essential for their preservation is essential for the effective enjoyment of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And in the context of the deep sea, I think it's particularly alarming that we know so little about the deep sea and how it links with all of the other biomes and all of the rest of the web of life, as we say. Yet there are economic actors seeking so urgently to exploit it, actually capitalizing on a claim that this will help address a different environmental crisis. And I think we need to start from a point of acknowledging that we can't replace one form of extractivism with another form of extractivism and not change anything about consumer behavior and not change anything about inequality in the world and expect to have good results. And in fact, we know very little about what the results of unchecked exploration of the deep sea and its impacts would be, including on human rights. And so our messages state that states should commit not to proceed with plans for deep sea mineral extraction until such a time as adequate safeguards, including sufficient scientific knowledge, exist to ensure such activities can be carried out in a way that respects, protects, and fulfills human rights, including the right to a healthy environment. And I think another important thing to say here is, often in different environmental spaces, we talk about the value of the environment to people. Part of that value is not economic, and it's not something that can be quantified. It's the inherent value of nature, which is so important to many people all around the world for different reasons, whether it be religious, aesthetic, or other, recreational, etc. Like, we are part of the planet. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework emphasizes the need to be in harmony with nature. This activity does not strike me as something that, particularly under current circumstances, can be done in harmony with nature. And I think that's kind of the starting point from which we need to approach considering it and understanding what we need to do before it makes sense to proceed. And all of that, we heard earlier, we may not even need these resources for the thing that they're supposed to help us with, which is a just transition, because there are other ways of using these resources, because we don't know what the demand curve really looks like. There's just a bunch of different modeling assumptions that go into the call for using them. And I think I've already spoken longer than I intended to, given the time, but just to say that the considerations go on to talk about the rights of future generations, the rights of Indigenous peoples and people in vulnerable situations, the need for accountability for businesses in particular. And I think this is a really key element of the human rights framework in general, is that there are duty bearers, including states, but businesses also have duties and responsibilities. And you can't approach this issue, particularly when we're talking about the common heritage of mankind in areas beyond national jurisdiction, without properly addressing and creating an accountability and governance framework that includes both businesses and states, and human rights needs to guide that framework. The need for it to be participatory, any decision-making in this context, and informed by the best available science, and the need for it to be consistent with other processes. So the CBD CUP, for example, has stated that before deep sea mining takes place, the impacts on the marine environment and biodiversity should be sufficiently researched and risks understood, so that deep sea mining does not cause harmful effects to the marine environment and biodiversity. And it should be ensured that rules, regulations, and procedures are put in place by the International Seabed Authority in accordance with the best available science and the traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples and local communities with their free, prior, and informed consent. And you've heard, about efforts to advance some of these ideas at the national level. There's certainly a CBE discussion. There's discussions in other contexts as well, including the ISA, to address these issues. And what's important, I think, that we integrate the human rights element in all of these discussions so that we can avoid, a situation where we move forward rashly and perhaps for the wrong reasons with this type of activity that could potentially have extremely deleterious effects on the effective enjoyment of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. The very last thing I want to say is that the Secretary General's panel on a critical energy transition minerals, I just wanted to fill in some of the things that haven't come up yet, doesn't talk specifically about deep sea mining, but it does identify as its very first principle for critical energy transition minerals, human rights and a human rights-based approach, that when we're approaching these issues, we have to start with human rights. So thank you, and really excellent to hear from everybody, and appreciate the opportunity to contribute.
Thank you very much, Ben. And indeed, I encourage everybody to look at the document that your office has been and your team has produced on this. We know that you're going to follow also a number of these discussions very, very closely and bring these human rights elements in these debates. So thank you very much for your contribution, and we look forward to hearing you also tomorrow when we'll be talking about more precisely UNOC 3 at the side event. So this brings us really to the end of these exchanges. Due to the difficulties we had at the beginning, I'm afraid I will not be able to open for questions. I know some of you have to leave rather quickly. We're all already past the time we had planned, but there was one question, and I'll turn for a final word to the special rapporteur. But in it, I'll slip the question that we have received from someone online about the interest that was expressed by Martin's presentation, demystifying some of the arguments we hear for the exploitation of deep sea. But here, Nathalie Harm from UNEP was wondering, are there other elements or other discussions where also we need similar demystifying? Do we see other arguments? And indeed, we have heard from for example, the oil industry. Do we see other elements where we need such a demystifying, especially when we think in a broader term about environmental justice in this framework? So Astrid, final word to you, and if ever you want to comment also on this question.
Thank you very much. We do have a lot of myths. I literally think that that's like a question to address in literally another session or maybe a lot of hours. But I will say briefly a few things. One is the demand for energy and resources. Ben mentioned, and others as well. And we know that today 1% of population, 10% of the population is responsible for over 50% of emissions. But in that 10%, it's even about 1% of the population in the world that is demanding about a fourth of climate, or it's responsible for 25% of climate emissions. And as Bruna was also saying, it's only about climate emissions, right? It's all, and we also have to think about land demand, energy, transport, etc. So one of the things that we definitely have to demystify is development for who, and this idea of illimited growth. And that is also something that I'm including in the report about, we do have, and that's one of the great, I think, contributions recently from science. Planet has boundaries, and we have to think about and in that frame of boundaries of the planet, and also link it with wealth. Like, we can't continue, and the world can't continue, and some people continue thinking about more wealth without considering the human rights impact of that and the impact to the planet. And so I will just close it there because, of course, there's a lot of things to say there. And that is one of the key things about linking with human rights and accountability. Of course, one of the things that we're seeing with deep sea mining is the impact to the right of a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. But I also want to highlight that the right to a clean and healthy and sustainable environment is a tool that we can use. When we talk about the right to a healthy environment, we talk about access to information, public participation, access to justice. And those are three main elements that are independent rights as well, that we're not having respected with including and rushing deep sea mining. So whatever decision has to be made, it has to be with adequate information, public participation, and access to justice, including and starting from states. And there's an equality of states. So that is something that I think is very important. And I want to close, which I I also want to mention that it's not only me as a special rapporteur on the human right to healthy environment. There are other special rapporteurs that are working on this, and we are collaborating. Elisa Morgera, that is a special rapporteur on climate, that a lot of you know, of course, because she's doing a lot of work on the ocean. And me, we're working on a policy brief on the precautionary principle and deep sea mining that we will be, we're working on that drafting, and I will be hopefully be releasing that in the next few weeks, months, as a seed for the whole process and work that a lot of people are doing, and of course supporting also states and understand and unpack what is the precautionary principle or approach, how can it be used, and also how can ISA use it to comply with their mandate. They have a mandate to protect common heritage, and the precautionary principle and the right to healthy environment are great tools needed for the ISA and other institutions to comply with their mandates. So thank you very much for your patience, your expertise. It's really encouraging for me to see that the report and this drop in the ocean generates all of these conversations and collaborations, because it's the way that we have to do and continue strengthening everyone in the work that it's very important, as we know, and it's Geneva and New York and Nice and all of the work that Angelica, definitely, and all of the work that we need to coordinate. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the session.
Thank you very much, Astrid, for this very important concluding remark. Let me also, and I ask everybody to join me in thanking all of the speakers for the very, very interesting and very informative presentation that we heard. I hope that everybody has been able to get a number of information and an interesting picture of where we are and where we're going in this issue. And with that, I will turn for the final closure to our friends from the Geneva Environmental Networks. And here I want to thank Diana and all of her team who have made this possible. And we saw at the very beginning that it is a challenge. Usually we don't see it. This time we saw how much of a challenge it is. So thank you very much, because it's not only that you've made it possible just at the beginning, it's also thanks to you that we are able to organize these environmental talks on the side of the sessions of the Human Rights Council. So once again, thank you very much to the whole GEN team.
Just want to bring to your attention the event of the Special Rapporteur at 2 p.m. today in Building E. So those who have already accessed the Palais for this event can also go to it's room 22. Tomorrow we will be in room 25 for another talk, which is also an official side event of the Human Rights Council. And then we have also on Monday 3 talks. Unpacking other aspects of your report. These talks are taking place here, so we hope also to see you at these talks. And on minerals and resources, this is also a series ongoing, and the next session within that series is taking place within the UNEC Resources Week, which is in March, and the talk is scheduled for 26th of March here at the Palais des Nations in Building E, so hope to see also of you there online or in person. And all the events are streamed, so who cannot be with us at the Palais can join us online. Thank you very much.